I want to start today's podcast talking about Shohei Ohtani. I think right now is the best individual player in team sports and American sports. Now, I'm not trying to hype him up. I don't think he needs the hype. There was hype coming in. I want to get to hype a little bit later. But every night with this guy, like literally every single night. Our guy Hembo from ESPN, who tweets out a bunch of stuff, researcher over there, works on Greeny's show, Get Up. This was from 2 days ago. If you looked at the MLB leaderboard, Ohtani is number one in home runs. He was number one in RBI, but Garcia had 3 the other night, so he's jumped him. Number one in extra base hits, number one in total bases, number one in slugging, number one in OPS, and number one in hits per 9 innings allowed for pitchers. This is somebody who won the MVP in 21, was second in the MVP last year, and also fourth in the Cy Young. I'll say that again. He was second in MVP voting in the American League and also fourth in Cy Young. Now, I remember back to the radio days of like, hey, we need to talk more about this. You didn't have to have a radio show to ask that question, but you used to ask it a lot. And a lot of times I'd be like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Just say the guy's name once a week? More than once a week? Should I end every podcast with an Ohtani stat? Talking about him more than 0 times would be an improvement. So that's what I want to do. But I want to put it into comps and then try to figure out how to put together any kind of open about a guy who's doing something that's basically unthinkable. Like for me to stretch this guy's awesome for 10 minutes isn't why you're dialing into the podcast. So yeah, I guess we could talk about him more, and that's what I'm going to try to do. The best player in team sports. I imagine there'll be a little pushback from that. It'll likely be selfish. Jokic has all the momentum right now for what he does in basketball. I think Jokic just having the belt, which he has, deservedly so, but the idea that like no one else can take it from him, I feel is like a little dismissive to what Giannis has done. So if you say it's Jokic, there's not really a baseball equivalent because in basketball, we are playing at both sides of the floor. So you can't really compare the two, even if you feel like that gives a basketball player a better chance of being a two-way player the way Ohtani is a two-way player in baseball. The problem is Ohtani's the only one that's doing it. More so than with football, where you don't have the opportunity to do both of these things. And the best quarterback, like, say, Mahomes, like he's not going to be playing safety or middle linebacker anytime soon. It's just not going to happen. So to some of the other sports in basketball, football, even hockey, like a McDavid, who's the best player in the NHL, if he was also the best goalie, Is that what we're looking at here with Ohtani? I'm not quite sure how you would even do that. It'd be probably tough to skate back in position. I guess you could say that McDavid, if he played in goal, I don't know, every other night and then played the first line the rest of the night. It's like, again, this is stupid because I'm just trying to think of something that I feel like is even an imagined thing and comparing it to like what Ohtani is. So if Jokic were Akeem at the other end, then maybe, I guess, but there's just nothing else here, right? The quarterback has this massive advantage on importance to what the NFL is, because without him, you have no chance. And if you have somebody that's really, really special, he can uplift the rest of the roster. Sometimes we have a great roster with the great quarterback, but I think the great quarterbacks over the course of their career, you'll see the down years roster-wise, bad injuries, cap issues, that quarterback will still find a way to like get you into the wild card round, win maybe 11 games in the regular season. So I don't really know how we can compare anyone to what Ohtani is doing. We can't compare anyone in baseball history to him. We could do it with Babe Ruth, but it's actually not the same because Babe Ruth wasn't doing this at the same time to the level of what Ohtani is doing at the same time right now. I know that we're going to turn this into potential NBA Twitter because you'll say, well, wait a minute. If this guy's so good, how come he doesn't win? Well, that's baseball. All right. The sport is not the same. Quarterbacks, fair. Basketball players, totally fair. It's a numbers thing on top of everything else. But as somebody who worshiped Pedro during the late 90s and early 2000s, and again, is the best pitcher I've ever seen. They made the playoffs those first 2 years, but Pedro, who won 2 Cy Youngs and got fucked out of an MVP vote from 2000, 2001, and 2002, they didn't even make the playoffs. And they had the best guy doing it, I believe, ever. That's a baseball thing. That's not a, well, if this guy were so good, ... Basketball, it really is on you. They only play with 5. You already know the math. Him not being in the playoffs maybe is why there's also part of it where you go, wait, are we paying enough attention to him? And I'd always ask, like, okay, well, then what's the segment? As I'm trying to do it right now, trying to figure it out. But them not being in the playoffs, the Angels haven't been in the playoffs since 2014, and that's with Trout and Ohtani. Maybe it was also the hype coming up to it going like, is this guy really going to do this? Is he really going to pull this off? And we're really more on year 3 of him pulling it off. Because if you look back to 2018, he had the 10 starts. He won Rookie of the Year. That was more for the offensive numbers. But then he went from a stretch where his last start in 18 was September 2nd. Then he had the injury. Then we had the COVID season. He didn't have another start until July 26th in 2020. So it was 12 starts in the first 3 years. So I think maybe, if this is even possible, Ohtani maybe going under the radar a little bit, in that it was a slow start to the version that we've seen now. The version we were promised is the version that we're seeing now. But that was not the version that we got the first 3 years for multiple factors. Again, second in the MVP last year, 4th in the Cy Young. So maybe the hype comp is what we need to come up with to try to figure it out. Because other team sport players, McDavid, Mahomes, Jokic, it just doesn't really work. And I don't think it's fair to those guys because there's no real pitching category. The comp, there's nothing comparable that exists of what Ohtani's doing. So there's a very short list of players who had the absolute energy of the sun focused on their ascension to what they were going to be, right? That's LeBron James. It's Tiger Woods. Ohtani might be third, but it wasn't what it was for Tiger or LeBron. It wasn't. I think you actually could bring McDavid into this a little bit. But the amount of hype we have, especially when we're looking at somebody like Wembanyama right now, like what does Wembanyama actually have to be to feel like he lived up to the hype? Do you know how hard that standard is right now with the way he has talked about what he could be, what his career will be 15 years from now? What does that have to be summarized as for it's like, yep, that guy lived up to the hype? The bet, the safe money would be, yeah, he's not going to live up to that. Like his career will not match the way he's being talked about right now. That's the better bet. And that's why we should give so much credit to the guys that not only meet it, but exceed it. LeBron exceeded, right? The only failure that we'll really be able to say about LeBron when it's all said and done, and the level this guy is still at 20 years in, is that he wasn't Michael Jordan. Like imagine being there on draft night when he gets taken number 1 overall in 2003 saying, you know, Jay Billis is next to, I don't know, they mixed up the rotation quite a bit. And you'd say, well, if he's not Jordan, you know, we'll see. That's it. That's really, and there's some people that'll think that he's better than him. I don't, but that's it. That's like the only thing you can say is like, well, he was really good, but he wasn't Jordan. I think that works out. I remember the Tiger Woods part of it. I remember the first time I heard about him. I was in the dorms. I had like a golf dork buddy who was watching something because I'm the same age as Tiger Woods. So I was like, wait, what's going on with this guy? Like, dude, he's playing in a tournament right now. He's like the best amateur. He's at Stanford. He's the next thing. He was in Sports Illustrated. It's going to be this huge, huge deal. And I was like, all right, whatever. I was like, I think I'm going to get some wings. He made the cut as an amateur at the Masters, I believe, in 95. He turned pro in August of 96. He had not made the cut at the Masters prior to the official announcement. The U.S. Open, he finished 82nd. The Open Championship, he tied for 22nd. This is his first like rookie year, 96, not a full schedule. He had some other tournament where he tied for 60th. And I remember, this is actually funny. I remember being at like a family. It wasn't like a full-blown family reunion. It was a family gathering. And I had all these great uncles that were just old. They're just old. That's the great part, right? And they'd golf all the time. That was their thing. And I didn't really get it as a little kid. It was like, oh, you guys can't stand your wives, so you guys just drink all day, golf, and then come back and whatever. Anyway, I'm kidding around a little bit. And, you know, I'm finishing up school. And, you know, one of these great uncles that I did really like, but he was just really, really old. And he was taking pride almost in the idea that Tiger was struggling at this point. He's like, oh, not so easy, is it? Not so easy. Looking back, I'm like, wait, was he racist or just a weird golf guy that was like super protective of like, golfers can get a little weird about like, pretty hard sport. Like, yeah, I get it. You think it's the hardest thing ever. And then Tiger had 5 top 5 finishes with 2 wins to end his rookie season, then won the Masters by a record differential, who's minus 18, set a course record, has all the majors. We know it got derailed there a little bit towards the end, but to do what Tiger did, he, along with LeBron, and I think McDavid's on that track here, to exceed what we thought of them. I don't think anybody else is on that list. And Ohtani, from a production standpoint, is there. But there's another story here because I remember the feeling when I felt like LeBron had arrived. It was in 2007. He scores 48 in Game 5 against Detroit. I remember this vividly because I was at a college reunion. Big reunion guy here lately. And we were at a bar, and you just started seeing LeBron take over against this Pistons team that had kind of been the team. And I remember my buddies being like, hey, we're going somewhere else because we got to go meet up at this reunion thing. I was like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not missing any of this. Like, he's arrived, and this is real. And I always felt like that 2007 finals run for LeBron was so incredibly impressive because that Cleveland team was not good at all. But it happened. The same way with Tiger and that Masters Sunday in 97, sitting around, think turkey bacons, buddies on the couch. And now we're watching golf in a way we had never watched before. Because you're like, wait, what is he doing? What's his score? Who's in second? What's the course record? Like, holy shit, like, is this guy really going to do it? And for Ohtani, he's doing it in the ways that baseball, keeps track of itself over the 162. But for all of us to have that moment where, whether it's feeling like Ohtani arrives, because it's not him arriving as a baseball player, he's already done that. It's him arriving in our daily consciousness of the things that we care about. It's the other people that never cared before caring about it. And he has the talent, and he's so incredibly rare is underselling it. He's different than anything we've ever seen in this sport that we'll never actually appreciate it enough until it's one of those moments this fall, next fall, just a fall where he's playing playoff baseball, and we can point back to that moment that we're all share, like this short list of guys we just talked about.